Well, welcome everybody to Discovery. My name is Mike, in case we never met before, and I get to be on the teaching team. Really grateful to be here with you as we start a new year. I got to be with you at Christmas, and I haven't had a chance to say Happy New Year, so Happy New Year, everybody. Glad you're here today. Some of you probably set some New Year's resolutions, right? Some fitness goals. You're going to read more, going to manage your time better, you're going to count your steps, count your carbs, all that stuff. Well, as Rusty and Matt have already revealed to us, we're all trying to go on a debt diet together at the start of this new decade. And we're just simply trying to unpack some very practical stuff from God's Word about money management. I don't know whether you know it or not, but Jesus talked more about money twice as much as he did about heaven and hell combined. 16 out of his 38 parables had to deal with money management. 5 times more is said about money in the New Testament than about prayer. And there are more than 500 verses in the New Testament on both prayer and faith. There are over 2,000 verses on money and possessions. And it's Jesus who said, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. Because he knew that money has potential for enormous good in this world, but it also had potential for screwing up our lives and stealing our hearts away from God. So since he talked about it, maybe we ought to talk about it too. Got any college students here? Any journalism majors? Anybody loves to write? Anybody love to write? You're a creative writer. So if you're like an English major or you like to write, you know what simile is, right? Simile is when you use a style of writing where you say, such and such was like such and such, right? I ran across some actual college student attempts at using simile on exams. These are classic. For instance, the little boat gently drifted across the pond exactly the way a bowling ball wouldn't. That's an attempt at using simile. I love this one. Her hair glistened in the rain like nose hair after a sneeze. That's just so romantic, isn't it? This one cracked me up. Long separated by cruel fate, the star-crossed lovers raced across the grassy field toward each other like two freight trains, one having left Cleveland at 6:36 p.m., traveling at 50. If you've ever taken the ACT or the SAT, you know that's what they were experiencing when they wrote that. I like this one. John and Mary had never met. They were like two hummingbirds who had also never met. So, I like this. Her vocabulary was as bad as whatever. And here's one more. Debt crashed down upon them and buried them like an avalanche on a cold, dark mountain. I wrote that one because I've been there, and if you have too, you know it's not very funny. It's about the way it feels, isn't it? I mean, money's a slippery slope to navigate anyway, and then when you were snowed under this avalanche of debt, there really is a feeling of desperation that can smother you and overwhelm you and really make you feel like you are buried alive and you're not getting out. The latest stats show that in our country, this past year, total consumer debt totaled $3.9 trillion. So I thought we might just get a glimpse of how that looks right here in Ventura County and surrounding area. You were given a candy bar on the way in, and we promised it was absolutely random, just completely random. And I kind of feel like Michael Scott. I don't know if you saw the episode of The Office where he did his famous college speech with candy bars. But anyway, I feel kind of stupid doing this. But if you have a payday bar right now, would you stand up? Stand up, please. Now, this is not applies to you, perhaps, but you represent, stay standing. You represent the 11% of people in Ventura County who are not living paycheck to paycheck. You represent those people who have a fully funded long-term emergency fund. You're confident, you're excited about your financial future. Congratulations. You represent the 11% of Ventura County. Now you can sit down. If you have a Nestle Crunch, stand up, please. You represent the 59% of us who are feeling the crunch. You don't have a financial safety net, really no plans for creating one. Very worried on the inside, but still kind of apathetic about budgets and stuff like that. You can sit down. If you got a $100,000 bar, stand up. 100 grand. You're the people that are hoping that 100 grand will show up magically in your account before tomorrow. You represent those who are literally living paycheck to paycheck in our county. You're living with constant financial uncertainty. You're telling people don't cash that check until Tuesday. You're that crowd. You're in that crowd. So you can sit down. Now, if you got milk duds, sorry, please stand up. Yeah, you represent the 4% in our area have lots and lots of unpaid bills, and they are really overwhelmed, and they do truly feel like they are buried alive. Okay, you can sit down. Now that we all feel miserable, let's eat our candy. You can eat your candy and break your New Year's diet. The reason that we are genuinely excited about this series, at least I can speak for myself, is because of the freedom and the joy that's on the other side of this. Because I'm just telling you from experience, no one is beyond the kind of help that God can give us. I know. I didn't get a whole lot of teaching or practical help about managing money when I was growing up. My dad was a really good guy. He was a super hard worker, but he was also had a gambling addiction. And he would often blow whatever little we had saved. So our family felt financial pressure a lot. And the church that we went to told us that we ought to give, but we never really taught us any practical things about handling God's resources in a God-honoring way. So, man, I got out of high school, I was just clueless. I was really clueless. And add to that a few character defects on my own. I didn't always do a great job of managing the money that God had given me to manage. So I've been praying that this series, along with Financial Peace University, might help you avoid some of the mistakes that I and millions of other people have made. And maybe along the way, God's word will get hidden in our hearts. And maybe some deep character issues will get resolved. And maybe together we will learn some practical principles that can help us all just spend a lifetime of being a good manager of his resources instead of being buried alive with all this pressure. I just think we owe it to ourselves. And we owe it to God, we owe it to our families, and just to talk honestly and openly about this stuff. And I want to look at a lot of scriptures, so you might want to take a screenshot as they come up, or you can jot them down, however you want to do this. But I also want to use today in this session as a backdrop for our discussion the famous story that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 15. It's commonly known as the story of the prodigal son. It's a story about the goodness and the grace of God, first and foremost, about how God is passionate toward all of us who are lost and broken and make stupid choices. But it's also about this young guy who finds himself overwhelmed by life. And I think his life illustrates why so many people like us get in so much financial trouble. And I think that before you ever ask, how do I dig out from under, like anything, you have to ask first, how did I get in this mess? So I want to quickly give you just 5 critical financial mistakes from this guy's life and from this guy's life that can bury you under an avalanche of pressure. This is how it all starts. The first thing is this. You start longing for the land of Ur. Our friend Andy Stanley came up with the name of that mythical destination, the land of Ur. You ever spend any time there? I'm sure you have. I mean, I think we all have. It's when we start comparing our lives with other people, and all of a sudden, it's not enough to be pretty. We got to be pretty-er, right? It's not enough to be strong. We got to be strong-er. It's not enough to be rich. We got to be rich-er, smart-er, happy-er. And then, as we finally arrive in the land of Ur, we start to feel pretty good about ourselves. The siren song from this distant island begins to play in our ears. It's the Isle of Est. Now it's not enough to be prettier. We got to be pretty Est. We got to be rich Est, strong Est, smart Est, retweeted Est. I spent too many time chasing those elusive destinations. I spent too many times playing that comparison game. Man, if I was only ripped like that guy, if I could just play guitar like that guy, if I could dunk a basketball like that guy, man, if I had a truck like that guy, if I could live in a house like theirs, and on and on and on, and went just living this discontent, ungrateful life, longing for the land of Ur, constantly wanting more. In the story that Jesus tells here, that's really where the young prodigal travels. And he adopts the Taco Bell theme along the way, wanting to live Mas, you know. Man, if I only had Mas which of course is Spanish for more. In fact, the one word our appetite knows very well is más, right? It knows more. And like the young guy in Jesus' story, we all can get seduced by the myth of más. If I just had that car, that house, those clothes, those shoes, that piece of technology, if I just had that job, in fact, if I just had more, then I'd be more comfortable, more admired, more satisfied, more content, more happy. I want you to look at a couple of things a gazillionaire named Solomon once wrote. He says this in Proverbs 23, "Don't wear yourself out trying to get rich. Restrain yourself. Riches disappear in the blink of an eye. Wealth sprouts wings and flies off into the wild blue yonder." And he also made what I think is a very astute observation about the motivating factor behind our journey to the land of Ur. He said, "Then I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. But this too is meaningless. It's like chasing the wind." He's saying, don't let envy take you on a journey to a distant land where you end up chasing the wind. It'll only leave you wanting more, right? You know, I was thinking around how around the holidays, Jesus followers often say, keep Christ in Christmas. And I think that is absolutely great, but it's also a good day when you keep más in Christmas, because Christ is más. Jesus is more. He's the more that we're all really looking for. There's a second thing that can trigger an avalanche of financial pressure. It's a little thing called instant gratification. Because you know as well as I do, our appetites not only scream more, they also scream and right now. Look at the scripture from Luke 15, Jesus' story. He tells a story. A man had two sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate." When? Now, like right now, instead of waiting until you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. Now you might imagine this was hugely disrespectful to a Jewish father in that day. No one would ever think of doing something like this. He's basically saying, I wish you were already dead. That's why this highlights in the story the incredible grace of the Father at the end of this story. But it also highlights the insatiable desire for instant gratification. I want it now. You know, Matt talked about this last week, how our culture has redefined normal, financially speaking. It's normal to have what your neighbors have. It's normal to use credit cards and never pay them off. It's normal to be drowning in student loans for a degree that you'll never use. It's normal for young adults to want to live right now at a level it took their parents like 30 years to reach. And I know right now some of you are wanting to say, okay, boomer, I know that. But can I just say something to all of you who are in high school, college, post-college group, because I love you. One of my biggest prayers for you is that you would learn to be grateful and content all the days of your life. Now, I think you ought to dream big, and I think you ought to chase after God. I think you ought to figure out a way that you can make a difference in this world with your one and only life. And I think also you need to face the reality that you're going to be broke for a while. It's just okay. I got married at 20. I was going to college, so was my wife. I made $35 a week as a part-time youth pastor. I made $50 a week refereeing basketball. I made $100 a week as a part-time carpenter. Drove an extremely goofy-looking old car with a hole in the floorboard. Lived in a place we affectionately called the Green Cave because it was painted the color of an exit sign on a freeway. Ugliest house you've ever seen. We ate peanut butter every day. We had a newborn, but God provided for us. And Debbie and I look back, and we were no happier no happier now than we were back then. So I'm just encouraging you to resist the I want it now expectation. Can we just read together from the screen what Jesus said in Luke chapter 12? He said this. Let's read it together. Beware. Don't always be wishing for what you don't have. For real life and real living are not related to how rich we are. Don't always be wishing for what you don't yet have. You ever been impulsive, like lived in the moment, and you made a purchase, and you're still paying the price for something you no longer like or no longer own? I've been there, man. It happens all the time with cars, doesn't it? Especially to us guys. It's the young guy who gets his first job, and he's tired of driving that 2001 Honda Civic that his folks let him have, and he saves up enough money to finally afford something like a used 2012 Toyota Camry that he finds on TrueCar. And it's in good shape, it's reliable, he thinks he's going to get 5 or 6 more years out of a car like that. However, on the way to check it out, he stops by a new car dealership just to look. Walks in the showroom and sees this black, glistening SUV with like LED lighting on it. It's like, right there. And he opens the door and he finds a leather interior intoxicating. The smell is so good. He begins to see himself and his girlfriend four-wheeling through the mountains. He can never imagine this beautiful vehicle ever embracing like week-old French fries and apple cores and rolling around on Red Bull cans and the floorboard, And he reasons to himself in that moment, man, if I can just stretch myself a little bit, if I can stretch out the payments long enough, if I can continue to get raises, and if I can wear the same pair of jeans for the next 10 years, if I skip lunch and dinner for the next 60 months, I think I can swing this. And so he signs the contract and rolls out in his dream ride. And 3 months later, he is broke and bored and looking to sell his dirty truck, complete with apple core Red Bull cans on the floor. But he's got a payment book as thick as an encyclopedia. Resist the urge to impulsively spend what you cannot afford. Maturity is the ability to postpone pleasure. Solomon again writes this in Proverbs 11. He says, a thick bankroll, that's no help when life falls apart, but a principled life can stand up to the worst. There's a third factor that triggers the avalanche of debt. It's self-destructive behavior. In Jesus' story, he says that this kid got all together his newfound fortune, and he set out to a distant country, the land of Ur, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. You probably know by now, don't you? Sin's expensive, and it's costly too. Sin might bring immediate pleasure, but it brings ultimate pain, and part of the pain of sin is the financial price tag attached. And again, a lot of us have been there. You need to know this is a place where most of us are like the rest of us, right? We've all made mistakes in our life. So there are probably a bunch of us that know how much money through the years has been blown trying to get a fix, a buzz, or a high. Not to mention the thousands of dollars that get wasted every year on stuff like porn and other things that are demeaning to everybody involved. I read where the average American now spends $1,100 a year buying lottery tickets, which is much greater than the average yearly charitable giving that Americans do. Not to mention the bucks that are spent on junk food and drive-thrus and smoking and other things that are harmful to our bodies. The prodigal son, he partied hard with his cash until the law of increased appetite, diminished return, took over his life. And it says this in Proverbs 23, for drunkards and gluttons, they become poor, financially poor, and drowsiness clothes them in rags. Fourth thing that will bury you alive is simply spending more than you got. Spending more than you got. I have learned something. It took me a while to learn this, but it's very, very profound. I want to pass it on to you. 90 days is not the same as cash. Did you know that? It's not. It's not the same. In fact, they ought to rename that plan the lay awake plan, right? Because that's what you do. You lay awake thinking, why did I spend all that money at Christmas, right? And I get them all the time. Those ego-boosting letters from credit card companies. On the outside of the envelope it says, you are pre-approved. I go, me? Approved? I've been searching for approval all my life. Thank you. Thanks. Somebody out there affirms my word. Somebody out there likes me. They trust me. They want me to have all the things that I do deserve. And they will even affirm my self-image by increasing my credit limit to make it easy for me to make these simple, small, minimum payments for the next 700 years. Now, gang, there's nothing wrong with credit cards per se, but when they're used responsibly, they can actually help you establish a good credit rating and keep you organized as long as you pay them off every single month. But the credit card company is counting on you and me not being disciplined enough to do that. They want us to get overextended and pay that minimum monthly payment. And if a person ever gets on the wrong side of compounding interest, man, It can destroy your life. That's why Paul came around. He told this young guy named Timothy, a young pastor, he said, Timothy, you need to know this. Godliness with contentment, that's great gain. For think about it. We brought nothing into this world, and we're not going to take anything out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we'll just be content with that. One last thing that'll take you in an avalanche of debt is being unprepared for storms. In the story that Jesus tells, he says that about the time the guy's money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. Whoa, didn't see that coming. You know, Proverbs 27, verse 12 says, a prudent person foresees the danger ahead and takes precautions. The simpleton just blindly goes on and suffers the consequences. Proverbs 21:20 says, and he says it really bluntly, just says, stupid people spend their money as fast as they get it. But a wise man, a wise woman, they save for the future. Now, again, you should not live your life based on fear. And you should not spend your life with a lack of trust in God's provision. But this is simply a wise reality. Storms come. Jesus told us, in this life you will have trouble. Storms will come into everybody's life. It's why Financial Peace University talks a lot in the initial sessions about establishing an emergency fund right off the bat. Because we have a tendency to forget, right, that car repairs happen. And emergency rooms happen out of nowhere. And water heaters go out one night, and babies get ear infections, and kids need braces, and you might have a loss of income from your job, or all of a sudden you find yourself caring for an elderly parent. And there's no way we can be totally prepared for every contingency, but we have to do our best and trust God to provide, and a wise planner makes allowances for the storms of life. All right, those are some of the reasons we can get buried alive. So let's talk about digging out. Again, we'll hope you get to Financial Peace University. Hope everybody goes and gets that practical counsel that all of us need. And the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk more about working a plan. I'm excited about that. But for starters today, let's give you just a few things we have to do in order to start digging out from under the avalanche of pressure. The first thing is this. Just call it what it is. Just call it what it is. Just like with anything that we need to change. You have to be honest with where you're at. You know, one of the beautiful things about going to a 12-step meeting is that you will hear people stand up and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic, or I'm a drug addict, or I have anger issues, whatever. And it's in that honest admission of weakness that the light of freedom begins to appear on the horizon for them. And that's the young guy in Jesus' story. Eventually he acknowledges, you know what? This stinks. Look at where I am. My life's a wreck. You just have to call it what it is. Just name it. Say, you know what? I'm in financial bondage. The Bible puts it like this in Proverbs 22. The borrower is actually slave to the lender. That's the spirit of it. It's bondage. You sign up for debt, you enslave yourself to it, and you just give up a little slice of that precious commodity called freedom. It obligates you to earning pressures. You better earn it and earn it consistently. You're always afraid of layoffs. You're always counting on raises and bonuses coming your way because you know you're way out there on a limb. And I'm just telling you, that's not a pressure that God intends for you and I to live with. Because for starters, it undermines your joy. I mean, you can't even really enjoy Christmas at all. You can't enjoy a vacation. You feel guilty about taking a night out or going out to eat. You're thinking, oh man, we got so much debt. I ought to be paying this debt off, and all I'm doing is adding to the problem. It erodes giving opportunities. As a Christ follower, God has put it in our hearts to want to help other people. There's another famous story that Jesus tells us. It's called the parable of the Good Samaritan. Have you heard this story about a guy that finds another guy beaten up by the side of the road? It's not only a story of compassion, but it's a story of good money management. Because the Good Samaritan that happens upon this guy, he had enough cash extra to pay for the guy's needs, to put the injured guy in a hotel. He had discretionary funds at his immediate disposal. And you and I have good hearts, and we want to help, and we get inspired to give and to share, but we find ourselves in such a financial prison that we can't. And I'm just telling you, I've been there. It feels crummy. Debt causes tremendous tension between wanting to express compassion, but having to pay a bunch of stuff off. It creates this tension between being joyfully generous and being overwhelmed with worry. So the first thing you got to do is just own it. Acknowledge the reality, call it what it is. So you know what, this sucks. It's a bondage that I need to be free from. I'm digging out. Secondly is this, develop a plan of attack. Start to develop a plan of attack. I got a buddy in Kentucky where I grew up who always says to me, he says, you know what, bro? If nothing changes, nothing changes. Wow, you're profound, man. You're so smart. But he's right. If you want to make a change in anything, you have to start walking a different path, right? A better path, one that'll lead you toward freedom. All of this begins with a decision. The prodigal kid said he came to his senses, he acknowledged his bondage, and he says, you know what? I've decided enough. I got to get together a plan. And he formulated a plan. He said, I'm going to go home. And it's the same way with getting out of debt. You have to say, I'm sick and tired of living in this kind of bondage, and I'm going to mark this day at the beginning of 2020 as a time in my life where I left the road of insanity and I started walking with God's help, God's strength, God's wisdom, God's plan down a different street, one that leads me to freedom. It says in Proverbs 21:5, and I hope you are jotting all these down, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. So the first step in this plan is to decide with great resolve, all right, no more debt. If you're going to start to dig out from under an avalanche, you're not praying for more snow, right? You say, you know what, I'm not taking on any more debt. I am going on a debt diet. In shaping this plan of attack, if you are married, it's crucial that you sit down together without a controlling spirit, without pointing fingers or assigning blame, and just openly and honestly and humbly say, you know what, we need to get a handle on this. We got to formulate a plan. We got to stop hiding stuff from each other. We need to work a plan together to build a God-honoring financial picture. Did you know that 54% of marriages that end up in divorce do it because of this reason? I mean, don't let this stuff win. Sit down and talk it out and learn and pray and start your plan somewhere. Many years ago now, Debbie and I did that. We sat down and we talked about the reality of our financial world and where we could tighten our spending and evaluate what was a necessity and what was a want, what we could do without, and how much we were going to spend in lots of different areas of our life. And we got on a budget and we cut up our credit cards at that time because we really needed to. And we wrote a pretty hefty check every month just to pay off that balance quickly. And we set a goal of giving a higher percentage of our income to the Lord and what He wanted to do with it. And we began to work toward that. And we began to set a designated amount aside. It took a while to establish this emergency fund. And we got on, some of you may have done this before, we got on the envelope system, kind of an old school way. We cashed my paycheck and we put it in different envelopes, and we kept the envelopes. I have no idea why we did it. We kept them in the underwear drawer for some reason. And we had a grocery envelope, a gas envelope, had an entertainment envelope. When the golf envelope ran out, I didn't play golf. I was out of money in my envelope. When the eat out envelope ran out, we ate ramen noodles. When the haircut envelope ran out, I would loan Debbie my miscellaneous envelope. We worked this plan for several years until we could get disciplined enough to do it without the envelopes. And our kids were even on an envelope system. They had a Jesus envelope, a savings envelope, like a Happy Meal envelope, clothing envelope. Now, of course, their grandparents from time to time would pad their envelopes. But it taught all of us discipline. And now, decades later, by the grace of God, Debbie and I are able to give away far more than we ever dreamed we could. We get a thrill out of seeing our money go toward helping other people. It's so much more fun than any new thing we could buy. We're so much more content and so much more grateful because we were taught a proper perspective on stuff. And if we buy something now, we don't feel guilty at all. God is continually shaping our character, and it all started with a plan. In fact, Debbie and I are going through Financial Peace University again, together with another couple, just as a refresher. And man, I hope you'll sign up and do that too. It's worth every penny to take that course. Proverbs 14:23 says, hard work pays off. But mere talk, that doesn't put bread on the table. So you got to get a plan. Don't just talk about it. Talk never set anybody free. And if I could be so bold, again, because I love you, can I challenge you to start immediately? The kid in Luke 15, Jesus' story, he says, I'm going home. And you know what? I'm going home today. I'm like starting right now. Proverbs 6:10 has a word for all of us. It says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, a little procrastination, and poverty will come on you like a thief. Don't procrastinate on this. You owe it to God, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family to get a handle on this in this new year, this new decade. Get started now. And if you're in like a real mess, like milk dud level, I want to encourage you, stay at it. Just chip away at it. It took some time to get in. It's going to take some time to climb out. But freedom is as close as getting started today. And one more thing, and this one's huge. Humbly ask your Father for help. Humbly ask your Father for help. That's what the kid in the story does. It says in Luke 15, he returned home to his father, and while he was a long distance away, his father, he saw him coming because his dad was waiting for him, and filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and he kissed him. You can get a plan, and you should. You can get financial counsel, and you should. You can enroll in Financial Peace University, and you should. You can get on a budget, and you should. You can get an app on your devices to help you manage your money, and you should. But I'm telling you, only God, this good, good Father, who's filled with unfailing love for you and has all kinds of wisdom, only He can help you in the character department. He's willing to attack the root problems if you'll let Him. You see, I've learned that debt is seldom the real problem. It's just symptomatic. So maybe it's time for you to go to Him like I had to and just admit, Father, it's my pride. It's my envy, my insecurity, my lack of self-image, my immaturity, my impulsiveness, my greed, my lack of control, my lack of planning. That's what got me in this mess. And I need your help to get out. And again, I'm telling you, with your daily cooperation, He will begin to replace those character flaws with great stuff like discipline and contentment and courage and generosity. And as those things get formed in you, you'll have what it takes to start walking financially free. This is what God says in Hebrews chapter 13. It says, don't be obsessed with getting more material things. Just be relaxed with what you have. Since God has assured us, I'll never let you down. I'll never walk off and leave you. It's a good day when I learned that. And I started to embrace the truth that Jesus actually is Mas. He's more than enough. And He wants to help us all do this together. So what do you say we humbly let Him? I want to introduce you to Matt and Megan and let you hear their story. They're from here at Discovery of their trip through Financial Peace University. Check this out.
We heard about Financial Peace University from an ad. I worked in the financial industry for the last 10 years, so I actually thought maybe I could get some information and share it with my customers. We thought we were in a really good place. We were paying everything on time. We thought that we had everything under control.
We weren't as financially stable as we thought we were.
We were in trouble. We had no idea how much trouble we were in. Just thinking about where our money is going, it was just going everywhere, going through how much we weren't on the same page and how much I was doing all of the financing and bookkeeping and everything and holding in all of that stress and a lot of avoidance. And he didn't even know what was going on. Since taking FPU, our world has completely changed for the better. Every aspect of our life has changed.
Much more mindful of everything that we buy and spend our hard-earned money on.
It's given us just this overwhelming sense of peace and hope and excitement for the future, really.
If anybody's on the fence on paying the money or unsure about paying the money towards FPU, it's a life lesson, definitely, because what you learn out of it, you're gonna get your money back.
Another added benefit of going through FPU and finding our new church home was Matt actually got baptized over the Easter services. And that was also life-changing for our family, for him, for us as a couple. And we're very thankful to be part of the Discovery family now.